Hi, my name is Jake, and I am a bookish drummer. So for this video, I am very excited and very glad to finally be talking about the Stephen King Readathon, which is a competitive points-based readathon that will be taking place exclusively on my Discord server, the Bookish Drummer Discord, in the month of October. So of course, this is a Stephen King readathon, so all of the prompts are based off of Stephen King books, movies, quotes, characters, you name it. It is a Stephen King readathon. That does not mean, however, that you have to read Stephen King books to participate. And of course, this will be a very lengthy video where I go into detail about all of it. Me and Stacy have been working very hard to get this ready for y'all, and we're very excited, and I'm just thrilled to be going over with all of this with y'all. It'll be a lot to take in, but I'm going to try to be as clear and concise as possible. So in the description box below, I will have available a Google Doc, which has all of the information that you will need for the readathon, but I will be going over most of that in this video. Just know that that is there for y'all to see. And for the beginning part of this video, I'm basically just going to go over the basics for the readathon, what it is, how can you participate, how can you sign up, all of that good stuff. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump right into it. So how do you sign up for the readathon? Well, if you're not already on the Bookish Drummer Discord, use the link down below and you can join my Discord server, and you'll go under the Stephen King Readathon channel, and under that there will be a place where you can choose your team. And for this readathon there will be 3 teams, and they're all based, of course, off of Stephen King villains. There's Team Jack Torrance, there's Team Annie Wilkes, and there's Team Pennywise. So the way that you sign up is you go to choose your team and you choose which team you want. And after you do that, we will manually assign you to that team. And since this is a points-based competitive readathon, we're going to try our best to even out the teams. So there is the small chance that you might not be able to get your first pick. Like say if you wanted Team Jack Torrance, but there's a lot of people on Team Jack Torrance and Team Annie Wilkes doesn't quite have enough people, we'll probably try to take some people from Team Jack Torrance and slide them over to Team Annie Wilkes. So there will be a second option for if we can't give you your first team, the first team that you wanted, you can choose a second option, or you can choose the option to put me on any team that will just even out the teams, because we're going to try to work it out to all the teams are even, because we're not doing any kind of averaging of scores. We're only doing, it's points based, and whatever your team has, that's what your team gets. So we don't want to have a team that has like 50 members versus a team that has like 20, because that's not going to be even. So we're going to try our best to even out the teams, even out the playing field. So that's how you choose your team. And if we can't get you on your first team, we will get you on your second choice, just to try to even the teams out so it's all fair. So because we will try to even out the teams, we're going to wait a few days, maybe like 2 or 3 days, until we actually manually assign you the team. So just in case, you know, like we don't want to do it on the first day and then have like a wave of people come and then we're just going to have to change it anyway. So probably just wait a few days after you pick, and then we'll see how the teams even up, and then we'll start manually assigning the team role to people. And of course, like I mentioned, you can choose between 3 teams. There's Team Jack Torrance, Team Annie Wilkes, and Team Pennywise. And for each one of these teams, there is a team captain. I am team captain of Team Jack Torrance. Josephina from Fina Reads is the team captain for Team Annie Wilkes. And Andrew from Andrew's Wizardly Reads is the team captain for Team Pennywise. And of course, if you're not already subscribed to both of their channels, go do that, because they are both King fans and they have excellent YouTube channels. So each team has a total of 6 prompts, which comes out to 18 prompts, but there will also be a 19th prompt. And of course, if you're a Dark Tower fan or a Stephen King fan, you know that the number 19 is very important to the King multiverse. So there are 19 prompts, and I will be going over all of those prompts in very good detail at the second half of the video. For now, just know that each team has 6 prompts, and then there is a 19th prompt. Also, I should quickly mention that there are 19 prompts, and you can only complete each prompt once, and you can only count 1 book per prompt, 1 prompt per book. There's no doubling up. If you read 19 books and they count for 19 prompts, that's all you can do. No doubling up. Remember, 1 book per prompt, 1 prompt per book. So no doubling up. If you read 19 books for 19 prompts, that's all you can do. Also, it does not matter what order you do the prompts in. You do not have to complete your own team's prompts before you move on to any of the other team's prompts. You can do them in any order you want. In fact, you might want to just read Team Annie Wilkes' prompts, and that's fine. Or you might want to read Team Pennywise, even though you're on Team Jack Torrance. It doesn't really matter. Just know that you can do any prompts in any order you want at any time. And now I will quickly explain the point system. And of course, this is how you're going to aid your team by either gaining points for your team or taking points away from the opponent's team, which this is the very exciting part that we worked this out. So here's a quick graph to show you basically the 5 options that you can do to help your team. And like I said, this will be very competitive, and there will be a lot of strategy involved because you can either gain points for your team or take away points from an opponent's team. And this is how you can do it. If you read a non-King book, a non-Stephen King book for your team's prompts, you gain points for your team. And if you read a Stephen King book for your team's prompts, you gain slightly more points. So if you read a non-King book for your team, that's plus 20 points. If you read a Stephen King book for your team's prompts, that's plus 30 points. But if you read a non-Stephen King book for an opponent's team's prompts, that team loses 10 points. And if you read a Stephen King book for one of your opponent's team's prompts, that team loses 15 points. And then the 5th way that you can help your team is the 19th prompt, like I was mentioning. And this is just very selfish on my part. I want everybody to read The Dead Zone. The Dead Zone is my all-time favorite Stephen King book. And if you read The Dead Zone, you gain 50 points for your team. That is the only thing you can do for The Dead Zone. You cannot take away points by reading The Dead Zone. I want to be very clear about that. If you read The Dead Zone, you gain 50 points for your team. You cannot take away points by reading The Dead Zone. If you read The Dead Zone, you gain 50 points for your team. I want to be very clear about that. So let's just go over a quick example of how the point system would work. So here are 4 examples if you're on Team Jack Torrance, how this would all work out for you. If you're on Team Jack Torrance and you read the book The Girl on the Train, and you complete that for prompt number 1, which is for Team Jack Torrance, you gain 20 points for your team. And let's say you're on Team Jack Torrance and you read The Shining, of course, by Stephen King, and you count that for prompt number 5, which is for your team, Jack Torrance. You gain 30 points for your team. Now let's say you read The Martian by Andy Weir, and you count that for prompt number 10, which is a prompt for Team Annie Wilkes. You take away 10 points from Team Annie Wilkes. So whatever prompt you do for another team, that team loses points. So since you did prompt number 10 for Team Annie Wilkes loses 10 points. Now let's say you're on Team Jack Torrance and you read Pet Sematary, and you count that for prompt number 15, which is a prompt for Team Pennywise. Team Pennywise would then lose 15 points. Because you read a Stephen King book, it's 15 points. And because it was a prompt for Team Pennywise, they lose points. So I want to be very clear about that. If you're on a team and you do a prompt for another team, that team loses points. You can't choose which team to take points away from. You can only take points away from the team that you read prompts for, if that makes any sense. So if you're on Team Jack Torrance and you read a prompt for Team Annie Wilkes loses points. And then if you're on Team Jack Torrance and you read a prompt for Team Pennywise loses points. And then, like I've said, if you read the dead zone, your team gains 50 points. You can't take away 50 points from a team. Your team gains 50 points. And in order to submit your points, we will have a Google tracking form so that people can submit their books, and we will keep track of all of the points. This Google tracking form will be released on October 1st on Discord. And because this is a points-based competitive readathon, we will be doing scoreboard updates every week. And there will be a lot of strategy involved, of course, because not only do you have the ability to gain points for your team, you also have the ability to take points away from teams. So let's just say, for instance, at the end of week 1, Team Annie Wilkes is winning by 300 points. You're like, okay, well, Team Jack Torrance and Team Pennywise, they might want to, get with their teams and say, oh, we want to take away points from Annie Wilkes, so let's read a bunch of their prompts. And then all of a sudden in week 2, Team Annie Wilkes is down, but Team Pennywise, they're leading by a lot. Okay, so what do we do now? So yeah, I think it's going to be a lot of fun. There's going to be a lot of strategy involved. And just remember, this is all for fun. Don't be a dick, right? This is all just for fun. Don't be an asshole, right? Like we're in this because we love to read. We're not trying to offend anybody. We're just trying to have a good time reading with everybody and have a little bit of fun in the process. So please don't be a dick. And like I've said before, all the information that I'm going over in this video will be available in the Google Doc down below, and it'll all be readily available on Discord. And if you do have any questions, you can either ask me, Stacy, or one of the mods on my Discord server. I will say, however, before you ask us any questions, please check out the frequently asked questions channel that will be available in the Stephen King Readathon area. We have tons of questions that we think people are going to ask. So if you do have a question, please check that out. I'm sure, like 95% sure, that we'll answer it there. And if it's not answered there, then you can reach out to one of us. But please, before you message any of us about any questions you might have, please check out the FAQ section, because we were very thorough about what questions people might ask. Please check that out before you reach out to any of us, please. And I will be going over a few of the more common ones in this video, so please stay tuned for that. So the main rule with choosing books for any of these prompts is that they all have to be at least 200 pages. So you have a 200-page minimum. But since we're not really counting pages, and page count doesn't really affect the point tallying, it may behoove y'all to read shorter books. For example, if you want to read Stephen King books and get more points for your team or take more points away from teams, if you read The Stand, which is like a 1,100-page tome, it's the same amount of points as if you read The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon, which is like a 300-page book. So my strategy is going to be definitely reading a lot shorter books so I can get through more prompts. You can read longer books if you want to, but if the goal is to try to complete as many prompts as possible, you don't really get rewarded for reading larger books, so it may benefit y'all to read shorter books. So a common question we're probably going to get is, does this book fit this prompt? And for this readathon, we're trying to go for everyone to have their own loose interpretation of the prompts. If you have a book and you honestly think it fits the prompts, just go with it, right? Like all of these, or I should say most of these prompts are pretty self-explanatory. We shouldn't have to have a lot of people posting, like, does this book fit this prompt, and so forth. If you honestly think it does, then just go for it. And like I said, don't be a dick, right? Like there's one prompt that's like, read a horror, psychological thriller, or a grimdark book. Don't read a fantasy romance. That does not fit in the slightest, right? And then there's a prompt dealing with paranormal creatures or beings. If it has a paranormal creature or being, you can count it. And if it doesn't, then don't count it, right? So these should be self-explanatory. And like I said, the second half of this video is going to be going over all of the prompts in detail. And I'm going to be giving examples for all of the prompts, non-king books and king books. So you guys should get a pretty clear examples of what could count. And yeah, but like I said, we're trying to let everybody have their own loose interpretation for these prompts. We're not going to be super strict with this. Like I said, this is just all for fun. But like I said, at the same time, don't be a dick. Like if you honestly think the book counts for your prompt, just go with it. Also, just as a general rule, don't count books that you started in September for the readathon. Only count the books that you started actually in October for the readathon, just as a general rule. And this shouldn't be too much of an issue, but really we only want you guys to read 3 manga or graphic novels, no more than that, and really just do one. If you're going to read them, do one for each team's prompts. We don't want someone to read like 19 mangas, and just because that's like too easy, right? Because you can just read those very quickly. Try to limit yourself to 3 manga graphic novels, and then the rest of them just do regular books. Also, I anticipate getting this question a lot. Yes, you can read Richard Bachman books and count them as Stephen King books. Richard Bachman is Stephen King. Stephen King is Richard Bachman. You can count Richard Bachman books as Stephen King books. Also, as a general rule, I know a lot of people like to do audiobooks. If you're going to read an audiobook and you're not sure how to count it page-wise, I would just say go on Amazon or Goodreads and look and see what the page count is for the paperback or the hardcover or whatever. And as long as it's over 200 pages, you can count it. But yeah, that's all of the general information for the readathon. Like I said, there will be 3 teams: Team Jack Torrance, Team Annie Wilkes, Team Pennywise, and I'm the captain for Team Jack Torrance. Josephina from Feeney Reads is for Team Annie Wilkes, and Andrew from Andrew's Wizardly Reads is for Team Pennywise. Each team will have 6 prompts, and there's the 19th prompt, which is Read the Dead Zone. And like I've said, the point system, you can either gain points for your team or you can take away points from an opponent's team. And I've already gone over all of the rules and probably some frequently asked questions that we're probably going to get. So yeah, that's all of the general information that I have. But now for the fun business of actually going over all of the prompts, which I will do right now. So these are the prompts for Team Jack Torrance. And of course, prompt number 1 for Team Jack Torrance is Jack Torrance. Read a book with a writer or alcoholic main character. And there's lots of options for this. An option for a non-king book would be Verity by Colleen Hoover, because the main character in this book is a writer. So it would count. And then for a Stephen King book, you have plenty of options because Stephen King loves to use writer characters. But one that I'll go with here is The Dark Half, because the character is a writer. So those are a couple of options. And prompt number 2 is pretty self-explanatory. Full dark, no stars. Read a horror, psychological thriller, or grim dark book. If your book is one of those genres, you can count it. If it's not, don't count it. Very self-explanatory. And prompt number 3 is Captain Trips. Read a book with a deadly disease. Now, just because this is a Stephen King-based readathon does not mean you have to read horror and thriller books. You can read any genre you want to. For example, Kings of the Wild does have a deadly disease. It has the rot, which kills people. So you can count that. And then obviously Captain Trips, for Stephen King, is referring to The Stand. But if you don't want to read a 1,100-page tome, you could read Cell, which does have a deadly disease where if you answer your phone, you turn into a zombie. So yeah, you could count that. And then prompt number 4, again, very self-explanatory, is Thinner. Read a book between 200 and 300 pages. Now, if you're off by like a couple pages, like if your book is like 302 pages or your book is like 198 pages, we're not going to be super strict. But again, don't read like a short story or a really short novella. And obviously don't count a book that's longer than that. So yeah, very self-explanatory, and an example could be After Dark by Haruki Murakami. It's between 200 and 300 pages. And for Stephen King, you could go with something like Carrie, which is his debut novel, and it's very short. It's between 200 and 300 pages. And then prompt number 5 is Overlook Hotel, read a book set in a haunted house. Now, an example could be Wonderland by Zoe Stage, which definitely takes place in a haunted house. And of course, Overlook Hotel, The Shining. You could obviously count that. And the last prompt for Team Jack Torrance is Children of the Corn, read a book with a creepy kid character. And a non-king example could be Imaginary Friend by Stephen Chbosky, one of my all-time favorite horror books, and it for sure has a creepy-ass kid character. And then Stephen King is known for writing terrific kid characters, so you could go with a lot of books, but an example could be Firestarter, which is about a 7-year-old girl who can light stuff on fire. Pretty creepy. And now we're moving on to the prompts for Team Annie Wilkes. And for number 7, it's Annie Wilkes. Read a book with an unstable character. And a non-king example could be You by Caroline Kepnes, which is about a stalker who stalks women and kills people. I would say he's unstable. And of course, for Annie Wilkes, you could read Misery, which is one of my all-time favorite Stephen King books, and she is definitely unstable. Prompt number 8 is I'm your number one fan. Read a book by one of your favorite authors, and should be pretty self-explanatory. If it's by one of your favorite authors, you can count it. And if Stephen King isn't one of your favorite authors, you could, pick like a book that you're the most excited for, or, it's tough though, because not everyone is a huge Stephen King fan, but essentially if you read a Stephen King book, you can go ahead and count it. And prompt number 9 is Gerald's Game, read a book with a closed off or isolated setting. And a perfect example would be And Then There Were None, which takes place on a closed off mansion on an island. So you could definitely count something like that. And then of course, since the title of this prompt is Gerald's Game, you could read Gerald's Game because it basically takes place in one room of a house. And prompt number 10 is Survivor Type, read a book about survival. Now, of course, you could go with any kind of loose interpretation you want to with this. I've got some examples here, like The Hunger Games, like they're surviving because it's a game where like the last one to survive wins, right? So yeah, very dystopian. And then of course, Stephen King himself has a dystopian book called The Running Man, where essentially the game is try to survive for as long as possible. So it is about survival. And prompt number 11 is Carrie, read a book with a revenge plot. Lots of great revenge tales. One of the better ones that I've read is Razorblade Tears, which is about two fathers whose sons were both married and gay, and they were brutally murdered, and they're out for revenge. And for Stephen King, you could read something like Thinner, which this guy has a gypsy curse him, and he is just constantly losing weight. He's becoming thinner and thinner, and he has to try to figure out how to get revenge and to fix his problem, essentially. And the last prompt for Team Annie Wilkes is Cujo, read a book with a real-life scary animal. Now, for this one, we are allowing loose interpretation as long as the animal does exist on Earth. Like, obviously, you could go with dogs and cats, right? But sometimes stories have, stuff like giant spiders or giant cockroaches or giant, whatever, giant bugs. Like, if it's an animal that exists on Earth, you can go with it. So an example, could be like Age of Myth, which has a wolf and it has a giant bear. You could definitely go with that. Also, you could go with Children of Time, which does have spiders, which does exist on Earth, even though these are kind of like bigger sentient spiders. They're still spiders, so you could go with it. However, you could not count something like a dragon or like a book that has a dragon because dragons aren't real. So just, be a little careful with that one, but, just loose interpretation. And then, of course, for Stephen King, Cujo could work, obviously, but also something like Pet Sematary or even Desperation has Coyote, so you definitely have some options for that. And now we're moving on to Team Pennywise's prompts, and for prompt number 13 is Pennywise, which is read a book with a paranormal creature or being, and so this would be, like either a creature or a being that does not exist on Earth, right? So, for example, vampires. George R. R. Martin has a book called Fever Dream, and it's his vampire novel. So you could count that because vampires aren't real. And then, of course, Stephen King has lots of options for this, but you could also go with Salem's Lot, which is his vampire book. So, yeah, just a creature or a thing or a being that does not exist, like werewolves, vampires, fairies, just anything that doesn't exist. You can go with that. And prompt number 14 is The Outsider, which is to read a book with or about a falsely accused character. Now, sometimes this could be a little spoilery because sometimes, like thrillers, you don't really want to know the outcome of, like, oh, is this guy actually being falsely accused or not, right? So you could just go with a book that, like, oh, you're not 100% sure if this guy did it or not, and the character is saying, like, oh, I'm being falsely accused. You could go with something like that, like something like Gone Girl, for example, could work. Or you could go with, a classic, To Kill a Mockingbird, which, this has to do with a trial, and it's all about this black man who is being falsely accused for something that he clearly did not do. So that could be a good example. And then obviously, the prompt is called The Outsider. So you could go with The Outsider. But there are a couple more options. For Stephen King, you've got The Green Mile, and then you've got, Shawshank Redemption, which is in different seasons. So you've got some options. Dolores Claiborne, right? So you've got some options there. And then there's prompt number 15, Sometimes Dead is Better. Read a book that's about death or death as a subject matter. And, if your book has death in it and it's significant, you can probably go with it. So something like I Am Not a Serial Killer, which is about a 15-year-old sociopath who is really interested in serial killers and people start being murdered in his town. You could go with that. And then, of course, Sometimes Dead is Better is referring to Pet Sematary. So obviously you could read that, but most Stephen King books pertain to death. So this is kind of a throwaway one where you could probably go with most Stephen King books. So do with that what you will. And prompt number 16 is Loser's Club. Read a book with found family. Now, for this one, found family can be found in many different genres, especially fantasy, right? But I just wanted to show this example just so y'all know this rule. You can read nonfiction for most of these prompts, and something like Dave Grohl's The Storyteller, which is all about his life in the music industry and his bandmates and how close they get. You can definitely count this, and you can count nonfiction for most of these prompts. And then obviously for Stephen King, one of the best found families ever, in my opinion, would be the Cottet from The Dark Tower. So you probably couldn't count the Gunslinger because the Cottet really doesn't come into form until book 2, but you can definitely count most of the Dark Tower books for found family, and then there's definitely a few others as well. And prompt number 17 is very simple. It's called Revival, and essentially you just reread a book that you haven't read in a while. So if there's a book that you've been really wanting to reread, just do that, and you can count it. And then for Stephen King, obviously, if you're an avid Stephen King fan, you probably have lots of options. But if you're new to Stephen King and you don't really feel like rereading a new book, I will allow people to just read Revival, which is the title of the prompt anyway. So if you don't really have the option to reread a Stephen King book, you can just go with Revival and you could count it that way. And the last prompt for Team Pennywise is Tommyknockers, which is to read a book with aliens or extraterrestrials. And of course, this would definitely lean more towards sci-fi, some horror, but you could definitely go with something like The Martian Chronicles, which, Ray Bradbury, sci-fi, On Mars, you could definitely count that. And then there's tons of sci-fi with aliens. But for Stephen King, it might be a little tougher because he really only has like a couple that have aliens, and they tend to be on the longer side. So you could go with something like the Tommyknockers or Dreamcatcher. And then there's another one that has aliens in it, but it's kind of a spoiler. So you don't have too many options, but, you could do, like I said, the Tommyknockers or Dreamcatcher, right? And then, of course, like I previously mentioned in this video, the 19th prompt is to read The Dead Zone. So if you do read The Dead Zone, which I will have a buddy read channel for it on my Discord. I anticipate a lot of people, reading it. So if you want to read it, you gain 50 points for your team. And the only way to do it is to read The Dead Zone. So that is the 19th prompt, and those are all of the prompts for the Stephen King Readathon. And like I said, if you do have any questions, please feel free to ask either me or Stacy or one of the mods on my Discord server. But as far as the prompts go, pretty much, it's up to your loose interpretation. But if you're really not sure, you can ask us. But really, if you honestly think it should count or it does count, just go with it. We're really not going to do a whole lot of policing or, really being really ticky-tacky about everything. This is all just for fun. So, like I said, if you honestly think it should count for the prompt, just go with it and we'll be good. All right, so those are all of the prompts for the Stephen King Readathon. And the first half of this video, I went over most of, if not all of the pertinent information about the Stephen King Readathon. And yeah, I really hope you guys have fun with this. Me and Stacy have been working very hard on this, and I just want to give a quick shout out to Stacy because without her, none of this would be possible. She's helped me out so much, especially with designing all of the cool stuff that you're looking at in the video here. And of course, all of this is on Discord. She did a really good job, and she's just been such a major help with all of this, and I thank you so much, Stacy. So if everything goes according to plan, this video will go up on September 2nd, which gives y'all ample time to join the Discord if you're not already on there. Go join your team, get manually assigned for that, and to figure out what books you want to read for the Readathon. I really hope you guys come check it out, and I really hope you guys have a really fun time with this. And like I said, if you're not already subscribed to the team captains, obviously me, right? But also Josephina from Fina Reads and Andrew from Andrew's Wizardly Reads. Go check out their channels. Go subscribe. They're great people, great content creators. Yes. I believe that's all I have to say for this video. Go check out the Discord and go look at all of that. And like I said, there will be a Google Doc in the description box below with all of the information for the Readathon. This video is probably going to be very long, but hopefully it answers all of y'all's questions. I hope you guys are getting just as excited as I am for the Readathon. I can't wait for October. Oh man, it's going to be so much fun. But thank you guys so much for joining me today. And obviously, if you like the video, give it a thumbs up. If you're not subscribed already, please subscribe. I do have my Patreon if you want to throw me a buck or two. Have my Amazon wish list if you want to buy me a book. And just thanks for watching, and I really hope to see y'all in my Discord for the Stephen King Readathon. Thank you guys so much, and have a fantastic day.